City Center Radio. It is episode 194, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, November 17th, 2023. Welcome to the big show. It is the Friday edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope your week is ending on a high note and that this weekend is full of all sorts of fun. If you need plans, well, slight change from my normal spiel with the upgraded site and working on the new calendar. The old link isn't going to work, but I'm going to put something up on the site by Friday morning at the latest. Fingers crossed. I've got a lot of content to get out there. But a link to the old weekend events calendar, since I don't have the dedicated page on the new site is not up and running yet. So if you need weekend events, just head to holycitycenter.com. And up towards the top of the page, I will try to keep a weekend events post for you. There's all sorts of fun things going on in town, and I want to make sure you all still have access to it during this transition period with the site's upgrade. I will say one thing, a promotion of sorts. I'm not being paid for it, but I'm excited about it. And you may remember a few episodes back, I had an interview with the folks behind Varietopia, comedian Paul F. Tompkins, and musician Jordan Katz. That episode was back on September 19th, episode 174. For those interested, you can go back and listen. They describe what that show is going to be about. It was a fun conversation. One of my first interviews back after a little bit of a break from those due to just the format change and time constraints. But as I said at the time, I've been a fan of Paul F. Tompkins for years and years. From all sorts of different projects he's been involved in, whether it was stand-up comedy, acting, voice acting, and also, of course, his podcast with his wife that I listen to quite frequently, especially during the pandemic, when you're just like, all right, I guess I'll listen to another podcast. It wasn't a big deal to listen to a few episodes in a row if you needed to. They've scaled it back now that we're out of that, of course, and it's not posted as often, but it's, still really, really fun, and I've always enjoyed it. But in any event, the show is on Friday. There's 2 performances at the Music Farm, so go see if some tickets are still available. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. But there's all sorts of things going on at different times, and also on Saturday and Sunday, of course, so go find your plans over on the website. Outside of that self-promotion, not much else has been going on. Just working hard this week. No big events, no concerts, no traveling like last week, but that's okay. It was nice to have the break, and we'll be heading home to see family early next week for Thanksgiving. Still planning on doing the podcast. We'll see as far as my schedule, my producer's schedule, what can and can't be done next week. So we'll be sure to circle back and I'll let you know, but planning on being, at least one episode, if not more, despite being home. I'll pack the microphone, make sure we can still update you on what's going on. Regardless, looking forward to it, and can't wait to see my family. I hope you all also have plans to see family and friends and have a great holiday, however you choose to spend it. But without any further delay, let's get into the latest news. The Charleston County School District is the state's second largest district, and they've been without a consistent leader for nearly 2 years. Now, you're all quite familiar with the drama that we just went through with the Moms for Liberty portion of the school board and former superintendent, Dr. Eric Gallion. So you probably knew that. But it's actually been longer that they've had, like I said, a consistent leader in that role, for more than a handful of months. And all of these changes have cost a ton of money. And who's paying for that? Us, of course, the taxpayers. So how much have we lost? Well, Live 5 News decided to kind of take a look at it. And honestly, it's been hundreds of thousands of dollars that they have paid out for contracts, of course, what they planned on paying, but also searches. So they broke it down a little bit and how we got in this mess. Well, it unintentionally started when back in 2021, when Dr. Garita Postlethwaite, resigned as superintendent of the Charleston County School District. That happened back on December 29th, so the very, very end of 2021. Somewhat of a surprise, never was really explained. Some people were kind of curious about it. Who knows what happened there? But regardless, despite saying that she was resigning, she remained on the district's payroll through June of 2022. So resigns December 29th, still on the payroll for the next upcoming June. She was stayed on the payroll as like a consultant, and in addition to still being on the payroll, she was still receiving benefits, including $242,000 from her yearly salary. Okay, whatever. These things happen. People resign. There's still sometimes you still have to pay them if that person in this instance is helping with the search for a new superintendent, trying to make the transition easier. Of course, they deserve to be paid. No big deal. Seems like a lot of money, but hey, these things happen sometimes, and they didn't know what was about to happen. But so that's step one. Step two, Don Kennedy took over as the interim superintendent following that resignation. His salary came in at more than $246,000. So you're paying, the former superintendent a decent chunk of money still, despite resigning. You have to have someone in that role, even if it's temporary, and they deserve to be paid as well. So right there, we're up already over, well over $400,000, approaching $500,000 just from those two folks alone. The district then selected a company called BWP and Associates that helped conduct the search for the next superintendent, and that started in March of 2022. That firm has been paid nearly $52,000, according to the district's transparency reports that Live 5 News got. So now we're definitely over $500,000. And then the debacle happened. Moms for Liberty backed candidates get the majority on the board. It's been chaos and dysfunctional ever since. Again, you're all well aware of it. Dr. Eric Gallion was offered the job. He became the highest paid superintendent in district history with an annual base salary of $275,000 plus benefits. Well, you remember what happened from there. I'm not going to rehash it all right now. But as part of a settlement agreement, Dr. Gallion was paid more than $355,000 in salary, as well as non-wages and money to reimburse his attorney fees that he had, and some other unreimbursed expenses, that he'd had that hadn't been paid out yet. So, just collectively, those things all fall into that $355,000 bucket. In return, of course, Dr. Gallion agreed to drop the lawsuit that he had filed against the district. So lawsuit goes away, and to make that happen, because I think they knew it wasn't going to go super well, they said, all right, we'll pay you this chunk. Here we go. It's more than what your annual salary would have been, and we're reimbursing you for attorney's fees as well as some other things. Just make this problem go away. A problem of the district's own creation, of course. Well, specifically those Moms for Liberty backed candidates. But just, and that did not need to happen and shouldn't have happened. So the other costs, you're like, whoo, that's a lot of money. Over $500,000 between the old superintendent, an interim one, as well as hiring a search firm. That's a lot of money to be up over $500,000 for those things. But again, those things happen. This last part did not need to happen and should not have happened, as we all know. I mean, $355,000 when his annual salary was supposed to be $275,000. And now we need a new superintendent in the district again. They've assigned an interim person who will have to be paid. The Live 5 did not have that person's salary. They're going to have a hiring firm again. That's going to cost however much. If it's the same as this most recent one, it'd be about $52,000. And then they're going to have to offer a contract to whoever they decide. And obviously that's going to cost money. So it's going to be, this could get over $1 million from the last full-time non-interim superintendent. From that retirement through all this mess, it could easily be well over $1 million when it's all said and done. And as I mentioned at the top, we're footing the bill. That's taxpayer dollars that are going towards that, which, I know people complain about taxes and, oh, that's my money. And, that money would have gone. I think the bigger issue is it's not necessarily that the taxpayers are going to have to provide more money, up front or anything like that. It's not like, hey, all of a sudden our taxes are going to go up, but that is money that could have been spent on many other things in the school district that could have, I don't know, benefited teachers and students perhaps. So now that money, all that money's been spent, they can't obviously use it for anything else, depending on whatever their budget is. So that's frustrating, of course. And who knows what happens down the line. All this money that was put towards this whole thing may down the line be like, oh, well, we weren't able to update this, or we weren't able to put the money we wanted to towards this program, whatever it may be. And then maybe they're going to need more money, and who's going to end up having to provide that? Us, of course. So, I know it might seem like overkill at this point as we continue to talk about the school board, but I think it's important to not just realize that, yeah, this was dysfunctional and embarrassing, and it's frustrating, and knowing that these folks are going to be on this board until their term is over, at least, if assuming they don't run for re-election, which they may, and then may win again. And so yeah, I get that. But there's also a price tag behind it. And that price tag affects everyone in the district because we're all taxpayers. But also, more importantly, like I said, that money could have been used for other things. And it's just so frustrating to continue to see what these 5 people have put this district through emotionally, monetarily, and it's just so much damage has been done in so many facets, and there's no sign of it slowing down. As we talked on the last podcast, this, like, they put on the show of, oh, we'll reconsider this whole firing the health advisory committee and putting our hacks on there who will do what we want them to do. And we'll get rid of what we view as liberal policies and whatever. And we talked about how some of the things that specifically Ed Kelly was saying were being taught were not. And, this isn't going to stop anytime soon. So I think it's important, as annoying and frustrating as it is, and you might be tired of hearing about it, but elections have consequences. And this is just another example of that. Judge Clifton Newman, who became a celebrity of sorts during the Murdaugh murder trial, for those who remember, of course, he was the judge who was sitting on the bench during that whole trial. And Murdaugh's attorneys have been trying to get him removed from any future trials, saying that he, after the trial was over, had said he thought Murdaugh was guilty, and so he shouldn't be involved, since he's made that opinion known. Well, Judge Newman has requested that a new judge handle any post-trial motions involving Alec Murdaugh's murder charges. This is according to a Supreme Court of South Carolina filing that was made on Tuesday and reported on by local media. As I mentioned, this comes after Murdaugh's attorneys requested the Supreme Court prohibit Newman from, overseeing any of Murdaugh's motions for a new trial, which, by the way, is currently still pending in the Court of General Sessions in Colleton County. And they just wanted to prevent him from, having any involvement. And I think a lot of people at the time were like, screw Alec Murdaugh, he's a murderer. And, I get that sentiment. But I think it was important, and some people pointed it out. Even Murdaugh's attorneys were quick to say, hey, we're not saying he did anything wrong during the murder trial. We're not accusing him of anything like that. His comments came after the trial. We just think he shouldn't oversee it. And I think I said at the time on the podcast when I talked about the story, that's not an unreasonable request. 2 things can be true. He maybe shouldn't be part of any further, trials involving the murders. And he didn't do anything wrong. It can be both things. So it seems Judge Newman perhaps agreed, since he did request that a new judge handle those. However, he can still oversee anything unrelated to the murders. So he could still oversee some of, like, the financial, alleged financial crimes, those trials. So you still may see Judge Newman presiding over some Murdaugh stuff, but nothing related to the actual murder trial, if it does in fact go to a retrial, as they're hoping. And by they, I mean, of course, Murdaugh and his attorneys. So his next trial is still scheduled to proceed as planned on November 27th, with Judge Newman presiding. That's because it's one of the financial trials. So he will be over that. The trial will be in Beaufort County, and it will look at the first set of charges related, to this multi-million-dollar fraud and money laundering schemes. I guess I should say alleged, even though he's admitted to some wrongdoing already, but he'll have his day in court. So that's the latest update from the world of the Murdaugh murder trials. All right, how about some fun news? Earlier this week, local officials, some business leaders, and Mr. Monopoly himself, yes, the guy from the game Monopoly, they were at Hotel Bennett for a media event on November 15th, and they unveiled the new Monopoly Charleston edition. Now, you may be saying, wait, there's already a Charleston-opoly game. I've seen it in the market. I've seen it in stores. Yes, that is true, but this is the only officially licensed monopoly version. There's a reason it's called Charleston-opoly, and you don't see the word monopoly anywhere on the board. It's not actually officially licensed from the company that owns the Monopoly brand. So this is the first official one. Not that there's anything wrong with any other products, but that's why, some people were kind of confused when this was being promoted as the first Monopoly Charleston edition. It's because it's the first official one. It's a company called Top Trumps USA. It's the American division of a company called Winning Moves International. And they create other classic games and puzzles, and they do all that under a license by Hasbro, which obviously I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's a leading toy and game company here in this country, and I'm sure beyond as well. So Monopoly Charleston Edition, no surprise here. A lot of the things on the board, actually everything on the board, is replaced. Those classic like Atlantic City squares, Boardwalk, Park Place, whatever it may be. Those are replaced with Charleston's cultural sites, some landmarks, charitable organizations, and businesses. There's a long list. Check the link in the show notes to see all the different things that are on there. But a few examples: the Charleston Animal Society and Low Country Food Bank are included in the game. Mother Emanuel is in there. The Pineapple Fountain, Angel Oak Tree, the Old Exchange and Provost Dungeon, Patriots Point. Some places you would imagine, but I think there's maybe a few that you'll be surprised by as well. Maybe just ones you didn't think of. When you're like, oh, what are the most iconic Charleston things? But they took suggestions from people when this was first announced, and I think they did a pretty good job of getting some pretty popular, whether it's with tourists, locals, or both. They did get those in there, and they even how there's like tax squares and things that are related to money. Even those have been rebranded. So, for instance, South Carolina Federal Credit Union is included in the board. For the travel squares, some of our bridges are included, of course. The Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge is one of them, the James Island Connector. And even Explore Charleston is featured on the back of the game. So they really did go all out. There's a lot of businesses, landmarks, whatever it may be, included. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people excited to pick up the game. The link in the show notes will also tell you where you can go ahead and purchase those. And lastly, early voting is still underway. When you hear this podcast on Friday, it's the last day of early voting in some of these runoff elections I've been talking about in the last two episodes. Hopefully it won't be too much longer where we'll have to be talking about elections and things. Once we finally have this runoff election day, we can move forward. And of course, then the real craziness of the 2024 election will already be kicking into high gear, I'm sure. But there was a somewhat surprising endorsement that happened. A lot of times you see endorsements and you're like, yeah, no kidding. The, Republican senator is endorsing the person who is also a Republican running for office in the South Carolina House or something. Or, oh yeah, no kidding. The Democrat endorsed another Democrat in this race. A lot of that's not surprising, but there was a pretty big surprising endorsement for the Charleston mayoral election. A former candidate, Mika Gadsden, who is a local activist. She has a Twitch stream that she does. I know it's slowed down slightly, not a lot, but slightly, as she was running for mayor, where she talks about things going on in Charleston and South Carolina as well, and is well known in the community as being, a very liberal, progressive, person, candidate. And she endorsed William Cogswell for mayor. Now, for those who don't know, Cogswell is a Republican. He ran as such, for his, in the state house. The mayoral election, you don't list parties, but it's known he's a Republican. And Mika, as I said, is known as a progressive liberal. You would think these two would be butting heads. And she would endorse, you would think if she was going to endorse anybody, it would be John Tecklenburg. The other person in the runoff election he skews more liberal progressive. He's not, they have disagreements, Of course, but it just seems like, well, if you were to guess, you would think she would have endorsed Tecklenburg. So it was a little bit of a shakeup for those who pay attention to local politics on that level. Gadsden, that is, announced her endorsement after a sit-down interview with Cogswell. It was taped. Taped is kind of an old term. It's streaming. It was, it was used. It was recorded in advance and then streamed online. There may have been some editing and things. Nothing huge, but that's why I said taped versus live stream. But in any event, it featured her asking him some questions about topics that are important to her and people that she's in community with and projects that she's worked on, whether it's, behind the scenes or by outright talking about it on her Twitch stream and social media channels and things. And, she ultimately decided that she was going to endorse him. And she knew that this was going to be a bit of a surprise. She even said, "I come with a message that may seem unexpected to some. Today, I'm endorsing William Cogswell in the upcoming runoff to the mayoral election." She went on to say, "Our country is divided, and it is the most vulnerable among us who bear the brunt of this division. Our incumbent mayor, John Tecklenburg, has failed to make any serious positive impacts on the Black community. The lack of progress is not only disappointing, but unacceptable." End quote. So, although you would think their vision and their ideals and beliefs would be aligned, apparently that relationship and what she viewed as Tecklenburg's failings was broken and led to her endorsing a Republican. She just felt he was the better candidate. And when she asked him questions, it seems she felt like those answers were good enough. His party didn't matter as long as he was working towards the things, that she felt the current administration had not been. As far as claims that Cogswell has ties to the extremist group we've talked about, Moms for Liberty, Gadsden knew that this was going to be a point of contention. It's something I've wondered about because he hasn't really said much about them, and he was recommended by them because they don't give, part of their bylaws or whatever they're called for their organization. They don't do endorsements outside of like school board races, but they do recommend people. It's like semantics. It seems like it's the same thing. And they recommended Cogswell for mayor. It seems that recommendation was based on nothing more than the fact that he's a Republican and they support Republicans. So that's kind of what Gadsden said. She said she can confidently say that William Cogswell is not an extremist. She went on to say, "I believe in fairness, and it is essential to separate fact from baseless accusations in our political discourse," end quote. So she seemed to believe that this there's been some TV ads and accusations that Cogswell is not just recommended by them, but is like actively involved with them, was backed by them, and that he would be how the Charleston School Board has been, basically doing everything that Moms for Liberty would want them to do. And she is of the belief that that is not the case. Now, I know Mika a pretty good amount. We've hung out a couple times at events. I interviewed her during the pandemic on Instagram Live. I was doing a series back then. She's interviewed me before, and I was surprised when she told me about this endorsement. I didn't see it coming, but I will say this. I believe that she did her due diligence and is confident in, what she's saying, as far as she doesn't feel he was giving her any kind of like lip service. Like, yeah, we'll work on that. Totally. And not do it. So I will just say that as someone who knows Mika a little bit. We're not like best friends or anything. I'm not trying to claim anything like that. But I do trust, her and her voice. And I don't think she would do something like this if it would be detrimental to the city as a whole. Now, does that mean you need to vote for William Cogswell or that I will be? No, not necessarily. But I just wanted to put that out there. And again, I was just as shocked as anyone when she called to tell me, that this was coming. So for those, again, who pay attention to local politics, I think it was pretty surprising. But you know what? Regardless of how this goes, it is nice, I guess, to see that here in Charleston, there have been people on both sides of the aisle endorsing both of these candidates. So again, although the mayoral election is not, they don't actually declare a party, we all know Cogswell was a Republican. He ran as one for, in the state house. And although Tecklenburg, I don't think he maybe has ever said it, and he's never held any other office, so he's never had to pick a party. You can tell by some of the things he said and some of the policies that he has championed and things that he certainly leans progressive and liberal, if not very far in that direction. But he's gotten endorsements from both sides of the aisle. Now, William Cogswell's gotten endorsements from both sides of the aisle. So it's refreshing in that sense to see that not everyone's just blindly backing a party. We're so used to seeing that from the national parties, as well as just people in our everyday lives who identify as liberal or conservative, that they just refuse to vote for anybody in the other party. So, whether this is shocking or not, she's not the first person to endorse someone from another party or someone who seems to be at odds with, their political philosophy. So I've just found that interesting in this race. We haven't seen that a ton in the past, but it is a little bit refreshing to see. I'm not going to lie. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. If you can vote in one of those runoff elections, please do so. And, just as importantly, enjoy your weekend, have fun, relax a little bit, and, get out there and support some local businesses by whether it's going out to eat, grabbing some drinks, going to one of our many museums or cultural sites, or looking at holycitycenter.com where you can find some events that are going on, maybe discover something new or something you didn't know about. But regardless, just enjoy your weekend. It's going to be a little hectic. Holidays are here, traveling, buying presents, planning, coordinating. This may be the last relaxed weekend for some of us for a while. So have fun and enjoy it. Big thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And also a gigantic thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each show. And of course, a mega thank you to all of you for listening. I greatly appreciate your support. It means a lot to me, and I'm really am truly grateful. If you can and haven't already, please rate and review the podcast, subscribe to it. That makes sure you don't miss a single episode and also helps boost the podcast profile on all these streaming platforms that are out there. If you feel up for it, you can go that extra step by going to patreon.com/Holy City Center and signing up for one of those support tiers. And lastly, although the merch store is not up on the new site yet, if you're just dying for some Holy City Center merchandise for someone in your family or friends for the holidays or for yourself, just shoot me a message on any social media platform or via email, christian@holycitycenter.com. Let me know what you're interested in, and we can arrange something. But hopefully we'll have the store back up on the site here before too long. Regardless, have a great weekend. I'll talk to you all on Monday. Until then, good night and good luck.